Imagine standing before humanity's greatest achievements, the colossal canals that sliced continents apart, railroads stretching endlessly across untamed land, cities rising from deserts, jungles, and coastlines almost overnight. Now pause and ask yourself a question few ever dare to ask. Who actually made this possible? Not who gave the speech, not who signed the legislation, but who moved the money long before the cameras arrived. What if the modern world wasn't shaped by governments or corporations, but by shadowy financial dynasties operating quietly in the background, families whose names you rarely hear, whose wealth spans centuries, and whose influence never required public approval? What if the most powerful architects of civilization never laid bricks, but laid financial foundations instead? Tonight, we explore the hidden forces behind history's greatest mega-projects, and why their influence may be far deeper than we've ever been told. We're raised on a comforting narrative. Governments build nations, corporations build infrastructure, public institutions guide progress, but that story leaves out a critical detail. Most governments are temporary, most corporations are short-sighted, but infrastructure demands something far rarer: long-term vision. This is where the idea of deep capital emerges. Deep capital isn't just wealth, it's wealth structured to endure, passed down, protected, and strategically deployed across generations. It doesn't need immediate returns, it doesn't fear political turnover, and it rarely appears in public records in its full form. Ask yourself, why do massive infrastructure projects often begin during times of crisis? Why do indebted governments suddenly find funding for ambitious builds? Why do risky projects get greenlit when logic says they shouldn't? Because somewhere behind the scenes, capital with no expiration date is making calculated bets. These financial dynasties weren't thinking in election cycles. They weren't thinking in quarterly earnings. They were thinking in centuries. And when you think that far ahead, you don't just fund projects. You shape the future landscape itself. To truly grasp this hidden influence, we need to journey back through the centuries, to a time when the world's financial landscape was being shaped in ways that still echo today. Long before Silicon Valley, before Wall Street as we know it, Europe was dominated by powerful banking families. These dynasties didn't just handle money, they financed kings, wars, and revolutions, quietly steering the course of history from behind the scenes. Among them, names like Rothschild, Morgan, Warburg, and others stand out, not because of conspiracy but because of their vast documented financial reach and the networks they built across continents. Take the Rothschild family. By the early 1800s, they had constructed a banking network that spanned Europe, moving information and money faster than most governments could even communicate. Their private couriers delivered news and financial updates days ahead of official channels, giving them a decisive edge in every major event. In finance, information isn't just power, it's leverage. The right knowledge, at the right time, could mean the difference between fortune and ruin. And what did they do with that leverage? They financed governments, underwrote national debts, and funded the construction of canals, railways, and the first utilities, laying the groundwork for modern economies. These weren't acts of charity. Infrastructure was a safe bet. People would always need transportation, energy, and trade routes to survive and prosper. By investing early, these families positioned themselves not as rulers, but as indispensable partners to those in power, shaping policy from the shadows. Across the Atlantic, figures like J.P. Morgan played a similar role, orchestrating the flow of capital in America's rise. During financial panics, it wasn't the government that stabilized markets. It was private capital, deployed at critical moments to prevent collapse. Entire economies survived because a handful of financiers decided they should. Their choices shaped the fate of nations. Here's a chilling thought. When a government depends on private money to function, who is really in charge? The answer isn't always obvious. Through strategic marriages, alliances, and trusts, these families ensured their wealth never fragmented, passing power seamlessly from one generation to the next. Empires fell, borders changed, but the money remained intact and mobile, always finding new ways to shape the world from behind the scenes. Let's look at the projects themselves. These are the feats of engineering and ambition that didn't just change landscapes, they changed the course of history. Start with the Suez Canal, one of the most important infrastructure achievements in history. It was a marvel of its era, connecting continents and transforming global commerce. Officially, it was a collaboration between Egypt and European powers, a symbol of international partnership on paper. Unofficially, it was financed through complex layers of private investment, debt instruments, and international banking interests. Behind the scenes, money and influence flowed in ways the public rarely saw. When the canal opened, global trade was permanently altered. Shipping routes shortened, empires gained advantages, entire economies shifted, and the world suddenly felt smaller and more connected. And when Egypt later fell into debt, control of the canal slipped from national hands into foreign financial interests. Coincidence, or consequence? The canal's fate was a lesson in the power of finance over sovereignty. Now consider the transcontinental railroads, which stitched continents together and opened up new frontiers. These weren't just steel tracks. They were economic weapons, shaping the destiny of entire regions. Railroads determined which towns thrived and which disappeared. The path of a rail line could make or break a community overnight. They dictated land values, migration patterns, and industrial growth. The ripple effects of their routes are still visible today. While governments provided land grants, private financiers ensured profits through bonds, monopolies, and insider control. Failure wasn't punished. Success wasn't shared. The real winners were those who controlled the money. The same story repeats with early global communication networks, telegraph cables running beneath oceans, linking continents in real time. Whoever controlled these lines controlled information, diplomacy, and markets. The flow of data became as valuable as the flow of goods. These projects weren't just funded by hidden capital. They were shaped by it at every stage. They were designed by it. The blueprints were as much about ownership as engineering. Ownership structures ensured that even after public attention faded, control remained quietly consolidated. The real power was built to last. The brilliance wasn't secrecy. It was permanence. These great builds endure, shaping our world long after their creators are forgotten. Now here's where things get uncomfortable. Did these dynasties disappear, or did they simply change form? Today, influence rarely wears a single family name. It hides behind trusts, foundations, sovereign funds, and private equity structures that span continents. Instead of canals and railroads, modern megaprojects include smart cities powered by data, vast renewable and nuclear energy grids, undersea internet cables, private space infrastructure. These projects are too expensive, too slow, and too politically risky for most investors. But deep capital thrives on exactly that kind of risk. Ask yourself, who funds something that won't pay off for 40 years? Who benefits when infrastructure reshapes daily life itself? Who profits when entire systems become indispensable? Patient capital doesn't chase profit. It engineers dependency. And when projects fail, losses vanish into diversified portfolios. When they succeed, returns reshape the global balance of power. This isn't science fiction. It's structural reality. So what does all of this mean for us? What are the consequences of living in a world shaped by forces we rarely see and decisions we never voted on? If unseen financial dynasties influence the world's most important infrastructure, if their reach extends into the very foundations of our daily lives, what does that mean for democracy, for accountability, for transparency? Are the systems we trust truly working for us, or for someone else? When decisions affecting millions are shaped outside public oversight, who sets the priorities? Who decides what gets built and who is left behind? Is it coincidence that infrastructure controls behavior, that cities dictate movement, or is it by design, a subtle choreography of daily life, that energy systems define dependence, locking us into patterns that are hard to break? Or is infrastructure the quietest, most effective form of power ever created, one that shapes us without our consent? Because once systems are built, resistance becomes difficult. The rules are set, and the path forward narrows. Once cities are designed, habits form. Generations adapt, often without realizing the invisible hand guiding them. Once networks are embedded, alternatives vanish. The world becomes a maze with only one way through. The most unsettling truth may be this: the most powerful architects in history didn't seek recognition. Their legacy is the world itself. They didn't need statues or monuments. Their influence is everywhere, yet nowhere to be seen. They built systems so essential that questioning them feels impossible, as if the world could not exist any other way. So, next time you hear about a trillion-dollar mega-project or a new city rising from the desert, a city rising from nowhere, seemingly overnight, or a technological leap reshaping daily life, changing how we connect, move, and work, ask yourself, who benefits? Not today, but 50 years from now. Whose vision is being realized? Because the real architects rarely appear in headlines. They operate patiently, shaping the future in silence, silently, and permanently. And as long as we don't ask these questions, as long as we accept the world as it is, they'll continue shaping the world, unseen, their influence woven into the very fabric of our lives. If this video made you look at history differently, make sure to like, subscribe, and share, because the more you question the foundations of our world, the clearer the unseen becomes. Until next time, keep pulling the thread.